The pursuit of greatness begins at first light and never, ever ends. Time is the enemy, the ally, and the holy grail of every race car driver. Who will be victorious? Only time will tell. Let's go.
Schumacher, Hamilton, Piquet, Ascari, Fangio. Those are just some of the names who have found their way to glory over the decades in the great country of Italy. Since 1921, drivers from across the globe have traveled to the country to take part in its Grand Prix. Today, the major series gets its turn to see who can come away with glory. This is the Italian GP, live on GSRC. Hello everyone and welcome to the 11th race of the Major Series European Region's Pro Split season, the Italian Grand Prix, live on the Global Sim Racing channel. I'm Justin Prince. Alongside the booth today is Christian Chowder and Samuel Ryman. Behind the scenes is our director Joe Peak, and he's using cameras provided by Dougie Beard. Now, since 1980, the Italian Grand Prix has taken place at the Autodromo Nazionale Monza. Let's learn more about today's venue with our GSRC track guide.
Welcome to Monza. This track has a major place in racing history, not just for the legendary races, names, and cars that have been here, but because it was the third purpose-built car racing circuit in the world. It's often discussed and reverenced among fans, and especially by Italians who have nicknamed it the Temple of Speed. In fact, the Ferrari fans here are so famous for their devotion that they have been dubbed the Tifosi and never fail to show up in droves. While the real world offers only 3 feasible layouts to race on due to safety, in iRacing, the inclusion of the oval and the lack of safety concerns gives it a stunning 9 versions drivers can choose from. The modern GP layout is of course the most well known, with its long history of hosting the Italian Grand Prix. But the oval and combined circuits allow those who thirst for more speed to satiate that craving with its insanely high banking. Indeed, incredible velocities are a staple of just about every version you can race here. Draft battles are not uncommon no matter which car you're racing. But the inclusion of the chicanes makes using an outbraking maneuver a much more tricky way of overtaking. The circuit is notorious for drivers getting tangled up with each other while running side by side in these slow and cumbersome corners. In fact, one of the greatest dangers for drivers is the first few laps when the field is still clumped together and attempting to navigate them 2 and 3 wide. While there are other modern circuits with high-speed straights, the fact that Monza sits inside the Royal Park just north of Milan and is still tightly lined with trees heightens the sense of speed here. All in all, Monza is unmatched in its history, thrills, and great racing. Its significance in motorsports history and culture is sure to be unchallenged for years.
That was a look at your GSRC track guide for the Autodromo Nazionale Monza. Now let's bring in my first broadcast partner for today, Christian Chowder, as this track has produced some great racing, especially when it comes to Grand Prix racing. Today's going to be a big challenge, you'd have to think, Christian.
Yeah, lots of passing opportunities at Monza. Obviously, lots of long straights. You've pretty much got I mean, 3, maybe even 4 passing opportunities. First chicane is the most obvious one, you know, slowest place on the track. But then you can also get a good run out of there and get a run into the second chicane as well. Not really many passes made through Lesmo 1 and 2, but down into Ascari, it can be possible. Obviously, Parabolica, you can pass there, but you tend to be vulnerable down the front stretch into that first chicane if you make that move. I expect to see a lot of kind of the DRS train going on in the race, but it's definitely possible to pass with these cars, and there will be some strategy to it. There is kind of a free choice on tire selection in this race. I kind of expecting that everybody's going to start on either mediums or softs, and then make a change to either run mediums a second run, or if they started on mediums, maybe even try softs for the end of the race.
Those tire strategies are going to be very critical and a major discussion point later on in today's action. But on that note, let's take a look at how the championships have fared out coming into today. And for those who missed the last round when it came to the Southern 500, it was Dallas Pataska who put on a dominating show, and that in turn helped him secure the points lead by 10 points over Pete Herod. Tim Claessens, who was strong very early in the campaign with 6 total victories, has slipped back in the recent rounds, however, to 13 points back, with Sam Harper on a recent charge to 22 points back. Kurt Crum is currently in a tie for 5th place of note, 41 points back, with George Gruber among your top 5 cars in the pro standings. Now for the sportsman side of things, Adam Fasciaponte has been having a stellar season on that front. 6 victories coming into today's action and a 29-point advantage over Sean Brown. Brendan Clunge 32 points back, followed by Colin Ward and Stuart Elder, rounding out the top 5 in the sportsman standings. Now when it comes to our Legends drivers, when it comes to the major series, David H. Baker has showed some great speed throughout the campaign. He leads that category with 3 top 5s in the campaign in 10 rounds over Ray Partridge, who has just the 1. Bob Beltrami showed some great speed in recent rounds, but hasn't had the results quite towards that mark recently. He is looking to try and jump Ray Partridge today, just 1 point back of him. Claude Belval, Richie Hearn round out the top 5 in the Legend standings. There was also the Legends Sports standings for our competitors, where Colin Ward is the one who's been dominating that charge, but it is tight, keep in mind, with Jay Brony and Wolf Dietrich Hotho closing up what was a decent gap just a few months ago. Simon Thorms and Peter Dahlmeier round out the top 5 in that category. Now I turn to Samuel Ryman as we look towards the team side of things, where it has been a bit of shuffling amongst the top 3 teams, but the 3 have been mainly consistent all year. Grizzly TFR and Bombshell.
Yeah, and you can see we got 33 points separating the Grizzly TFR teammates at the top of the standings there. The Daytona leading Le Mans there, and as you mentioned, Bombshell Racing Team not too far back either. Dog Bear Euro sitting quite comfortably by themselves at 4th in the standings, and Team Mad 5th in the standings there, also has a decent gap over the rest. But, you know, still some shuffling around could happen among those top 3 teams in the final 4 rounds left in this season. As we go to the sport team standings, you can see there's a bit more of a spread here, although not many points between Hanson Brothers Racing and HW Racing there for 2nd and 3rd in the points. And obviously with a team like Mr. Apex F1 podcast leading the sport team standings, you would have a feeling this round here at Monza is going to benefit them a little bit and allow them to pull out a little bit more with that lead.
Don't forget their second team is Team B, kind of in reference to the old cartoons of Recess where you had TJ Detweiler mention number 1, number B, so to speak. But let's talk about the race details and the numbers towards that mark, Christian. You talked a bit about the tire compound strategy. Today could be interesting.
Yeah, so modern F1 cars, obviously no refueling in the race, but the tires won't last the full distance. I imagine you probably could try and actually run hards for the entire race, but it's not going to be a good idea. You're just going to lose so much pace early on. So 53-lap race here, no fuel required in pit stops, but I expect we're going to see the pit window somewhere between about lap 25 and 35, depending on what tire you start on. I expect we're going to see a lot of people start on mediums. And as I said, they might even just run mediums twice, or on that lower fuel load where it's going to hurt the tires a little bit less, and probably going to be a little bit cooler towards the end of the race as well, with the kind of the sun going down just a little bit. Might make softs a bit more viable, but those are the 2 main options. Obviously open setups here. Incident cap is 24, which is potentially a problem for people. It's very, very easy to pick up a 1X through either of the Lesmo corners. So 53 laps, trying to avoid picking up 24 is going to be a little bit of a challenge, I think.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about this track and some of the danger spots. Turn 1 could be pretty crazy, to say the very least, to start this off. Could be also very interesting to see if drivers can avoid potential trouble. Now, you referred a bit to the track conditions today, and here's the interesting mark for today. It is 28 degrees Celsius, so fairly hot air temperatures, but on the counterpart, the track temperature, Samuel, is fairly low at about 37 degrees Celsius. In reference, that's 98 degrees Fahrenheit. So a little bit lower than what you would normally expect to see for a sunshiny day like today with the partly cloudy skies.
Yeah, well, it is September in the sim. It's also, as Christian just mentioned, about 3 p.m. Virtual sim time, as I like to call it. So that kind of explains that, and it's actually kind of nice that, you know, they've got this race set up here. You know, not all of these drivers are necessarily F1 Pro drivers when it comes to iRacing. We race a bunch of different cars in this league throughout the season, so it's nice that they've given them reasonable conditions here to put on a good show, and hopefully we should have that unfolding for us in just a few moments.
Now, as these drivers continue their final preparations for today's action, let's take a look at your charity in support of today's major series round, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Whether you have struggled with suicide yourself or have lost a loved one, you are not alone. For more information, go to afsp.org. Drivers had put in their qualifying times throughout the week, part with support for said charity, but today is going to be an intriguing one, Christian, because not only are there going to be potential different front runners, as you see with the practice charts with Joshua Wolf at the top of the board by 0.6 of a second, but some of the names you see on your pylon are drivers we haven't seen throughout the entire season. Antonio Navarro, for example, the 100 car, one of the first rounds for him. Villa, seen him in the past, he's back today. And then you have Jacob Oberslack coming in towards the bottom of the board. You have some newcomers electing to come on in, Christian, for this round with the Formula 1 cars.
Yeah, and I think that we've actually seen that before. I saw it in the Americas region with the Pro 2 and Pro 4 trucks. Obviously, the major series running a variety of different cars and track combinations throughout the year, and full-length races too, which is not something that's readily available for some of these guys often. Obviously, especially with the Formula 1 series and whatnot, they don't run full race distances. So yeah, it's a cool thing that it does bring in some of those kind of car specialists. I know I've got to go up against one of those car specialists tonight, and that's going to be a lot of fun. So yeah, I like it. Obviously, in a point sense, it can be a little bit detrimental to guys who would otherwise maybe have a really good event in terms of points. So say, for example, Pataska, Tim Claessens is not actually here today, which is very interesting to me. So Pataska's been fast in practice, but if he has to go up against car specialists, they might actually take points away from him.
Yeah, you mentioned that part with Claessens. That's going to make things very intriguing indeed for the championship standings. As some of these drivers continue to make their way around the racetrack, we do have a few on boards for you throughout today's action. Keeping an eye on some of these respective drivers. Here's Isaac Snyder, and we've seen him throughout the campaign, Samuel, but this is a different viewpoint compared to the past. Normally we've seen him facing the camera, so to speak, but today we see the angle where you see a massive sim setup for his steering wheel, and how about a curved monitor that is the size of both triples. You also have other drivers having similar rigs such as this one we see. This time, this is David Malnorwich for his respective onboard camera, Samuel.
Yeah, no, it's definitely interesting seeing the different kind of perspectives these views will give you. It's also, you know, there's only 11 turns around the circuit. It's actually kind of easy to tell what part of the circuit they're on, and he's reacting to something there. I'm not sure if he's too happy about it. But, and here we go. One last camera view, Justin.
Yes, that's Josh Wolf, who is at the top of the board, and as you can see, has a VR headset as well for the setup. Similar monitor setup as well to Isaac Snyder, keep in mind, Christian. So very intriguing indeed to have the option of either having the VR or having the full monitor experience that has become so common today. There's even some exhaust pipes there, I noticed.
Yeah, so that's the thing that I know a lot of VR guys struggle with, is in terms of the headset gets very hot. So there are kind of some solutions out there with rather large fans to try and help you cool yourself down when you're using VR. So yeah, a lot of different setups out here. Obviously, actually saw Melner, there doesn't appear to have paddle shifters on his wheel, having to do it kind of old school. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage, that's for sure.
That's going to make things interesting for today because they're about to be tested to see how those setups will fare out and how these drivers will fare out. This is the Italian Grand Prix and your starting lineup for today's action for 53 laps on the board. It's Dallas Pataska who set the quickest qualifying time throughout the week. Joshua Wolf starts to the outside. In row 2, it's Ross Banfield and Kurt Crum with Handsome Pete in 5th position. Isaac Snyder in 6th spot. Underwood will start 7th with Dick Moore in 8th position. Travis Henderson and Udas Puteklas round out your top 10 today, Samuel.
Yeah, starting on 11th on the grid, you've got Trevor Vavrosky. Alongside him will be Ryan Meyer. David Baker will start from 13th place ahead of Claude Belvol. Gordon Colan will be starting from 15th ahead of Vidu Vila. Rob Gull will start 17th ahead of Ray Partridge, and then rounding out your top 20 will be Tom Draylin and Colin Marzov.
And lining up on the back 2 rows, we have Eric Mickey in 21st, Jacob Obrolask in 22nd, Anton Navarro in 23rd, and Davis Lorenzo in 24th.
So many of your newcomers towards the back as the green lights are out. We're underway for the Italian Grand Prix, and it's a poor start for one of the front runners. Wolf did not get going off the starting blocks. One driver already shot up to the race lead. That is Kurt Crum for the 4th position. 3 wide to the first corner as more cars make contact. Several start to spin around. Others start to lose their front wings. At least 5-10 cars have stacked up into the first corner of the race.
Yeah, absolutely horrible start for Joshua Wolf, and then I saw a bunch of TFR cars all kind of stacking up, and that all sort of started to basically bring everybody to stationary in the first chicane there, and obviously a huge pile up at the back of the field.
Travis Henderson has already had to put his car on the tow truck as a result of that contact. Several more than 10 seconds back as a result of that situation. Again, more than 6-7 cars with problems. Eric Mickey has also just had an issue in Lesmo. This is all while the race leaders try and get themselves sorted out. Banfield jumped up to 2nd. Of note, 14 spots gained for Antonio Navarro, who is just behind the lead pack as a result of that trouble.
Yeah, so some drivers benefiting quite massively. Now, remember, these drivers do get one free repair, but you definitely don't want to really be taking it on lap number 1. So it's Kurt Crum who's coming around to lead lap number 1. We've got a nice battle for 2nd between Ross Banfield and Dallas Pataska, who got off to a bad start. Pete Herod is in 4th place, and David Melnarovich rounds out your top 5.
As these drivers continue to sort themselves out, it's Banfield battling with Pataska. Pataska up the inside, able to rip away 2nd position. So move your pole sitter back inside the top 2 as a result of that move. Now keep in mind, you see the tire compounds now on the right side of your screen. In regards to the mediums for Dallas Pataska, of note, the top 15 or so did start on the mediums. A couple drivers towards the back started either on the hards or the softs, Christian. Just a couple though.
Yeah, and I think soft is potentially a good option to try and get yourself some track position. You see Colin has missed the first chicane. He's picked up a marker board, and he's going to carry that all the way down to the 2nd chicane. Actually comes out a little bit earlier than I thought it would. But yeah, the soft tire is a good choice for getting away to a good start off the line especially. But obviously with that big stack up, that's going to put those guys at a disadvantage because now they're going to fall off harder than everybody else. The hard compound guys will be able to run the longest, but they're probably going to lose the most track position early.
See near contact, that was Ray Partridge who went off into the sand trap going through the Delaraggia. Also one more car off in Claude Belval. And the off tracks are coming into play and quickly, Christian. We mentioned the incident limit being only about 24 for today. Drivers are already pushing that limit with, of note, a lot of those drivers on the softs being involved in that early trouble.
Yeah, and obviously like a double penalty really there. Obviously the soft's going to fall off early, and you've not really been able to get any advantage out of them with that big stack up. And you can see right there on the soft tires, but with actually quite a bit of front wing damage, that's not going to help him. But I suppose he's pitting early, so at least he can change that rather quickly in the race.
Does that take extra time though to change the wing?
It does, yes. It will mean he has a slower pit stop, but I think it's worth taking, especially if he's probably pitting within the first 10 to 15 laps on those softs.
Now, one of the drivers involved in the incident, Travis Henderson of note, just came back on the racetrack. Ryan Mayer, who also towed, is coming back onto the racetrack now. But in regards to that situation, again, to recap, for those just tuning in, an early stack-up involving 5, 10-plus cars in the first corner. It all started in turn after Joshua Wolf, you see right there, second starting spot on the grid, did not get going. And in turn, started a 3-wide scramble off to the first corner a couple rows deep before things escalated right on the braking zone, and a bit of contact even before then.
Oh, and a lot of those blue cars there, and then Joshua Wolf himself, obviously getting it wrong on the braking, turning dead left into, I think, one of his own teammates.
It just looked like it locked up, possibly, Samuel?
Yeah, it looked like he locked up the rear brakes. As we come back to live action, we got a battle for the lead because Dallas Pataska has ran down Kurt Crum. He's looking on the inside of him coming into turn 1. Doesn't make anything happen, but third is getting wild as well. New driver in third place is Pete Harrod, so it's all kicking off after a few laps. And now DRS is finally coming into play. We have one car off at the opening chicane that sold this Peter Killis ran off course there. So the leader's holding station for now. 1-2 Crum ahead of Pataska, but we got new driver in third, it's Harrod, and now we got new driver in fourth as a 69 moves his way up a position.
Ross Banfield has now dropped back a couple positions. One car you see in the backdrop has spun around. That is Antonio Navarro, who has taken a cone with him along his front wing. So Navarro, one of the newcomers for today's action, having a bit of a situation. Keep in mind, though, Christian, he actually had the cone in his front wing before the braking zone.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm not sure where he picked up that cone, but obviously really disappointing for him, though, because he was up in 8th place after having started 23rd. Looks like he just got caught out by the car ahead of him, slowing just a bit more than he was expecting. Probably gone on the brakes a little bit harder and just had too much rear bias, and that's what looped him around. Oh, a big off in Ascari. I'm not sure who that was.
That was
huge impact.
Right behind the driver we were just looking at. He has now lost his front wing. That likely will mean repairs coming in. And a tough break there after getting loose through Ascari and slamming into the tire barrier. Biggest damage we've seen so far with the whole front wing sheared off. And you'll see that car snap to the left after making a pass attempt.
Yeah, so this is Jacob Oberslack. Now, the good news is he's only one turn away as he hits the wall, as you mentioned, quite hard there. He's only one turn away from the pits, so he's been able to drive it back to the pits. So he'll be able to get his free repair, maybe do a tyre change as well. Maybe he might want to consider putting the hards on and running it to the end. I don't know if that's the ideal strategy. I want to make a quick correction to what you said earlier, Justin. Ryan Meyer actually was able to drive his car back to the pits as well. I don't think he towed, so that saved him a bit of time.
Either way, it was still a lengthy service for Ryan Mayer after his situation. As we take a look at the battle for third position, keep in mind, Kurt Crum and Dallas Pataska separate by 4/10 in front of them. But for the Team Mad driver, he's been able to pick up the pace, Christian, starting to pull off and away to the point where he's broken the toe from the cars behind.
Yeah, Harris had a really good start. Obviously, he gridded up in 5th, so he wasn't too far back to begin with. But yeah, it looks like he's actually pulled clear for 3rd now, and we'll have to see if he runs down the leaders. Something that we've not talked about, a possible strategy option, is kind of short fueling the car. Obviously, you can't add any fuel in the race, but you don't necessarily have to start with enough to finish the race. And that sounds kind of a weird concept, but what you can do is obviously you can kind of make ground early with the lighter fuel because you'll be a little bit faster. And then towards the end of the race, you can either start saving or stay in the middle if you're in kind of free air.
I was going to say, it's a strategy that many people do go towards, Christian, because the lighter the car, the faster it goes. So it is a thought process that comes in. You just have to make sure you remember to save said fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm wondering if maybe that's what's going on with Pataska here. He kind of ran Crum down pretty quickly. And I think he's in a position where he could make a DRS pass not too difficult, but he just doesn't seem really excited about doing that. So I'm wondering if he's maybe a little bit light on fuel and he's just content to try and save a bit now. And the reason why you go for that sort of light fuel strategy is you know the pack's going to string out the most at the beginning of the race, so you're going to have that opportunity to sort of save that fuel late on where it's not going to be a penalty to you. but the lighter and faster car at the beginning, where you can make passes a little bit easier, is a huge benefit to have.
One thing to note real quickly, Eric Mickey has elected to leave the garage area after he had an incident just a lap ago, so he is among one of the first drivers out. Travis Henderson has also had to return to the pit lane for a second repair sequence of more than 4 minutes now. Of note, 4 drivers have had to come down to the pit lane for repairs. Others have significant wing damage amongst the heart of the pack. Battle right on behind. This is for 4th position. Ross Banfield able to take back that position after dropping back to 5th at one point in the first couple laps. Here's a look now from the driver on behind.
Yeah, so riding on board, that was a pretty simple pass. Ross Banfield was able to get the slipstream going down the front straight. I kind of agree with Christian that Dallas is just biding his time for that race lead. He might be thinking that maybe it'll be safer to do it during the pit cycle, or maybe he's thinking about the championship. He doesn't want the risk of getting involved in a collision, which is very easy to do here at Monza. Ross Banfield, though, having no such holdbacks, he's like, I want this 4th position, I'm taking it. And right now he's actually swerving across the track, trying to stop himself from being repassed.
Yeah, and that's the main critical thing, because when you think Monza, Christian, you think speed. There's a reason that this track is so quick. It's one of the quicker GPs in real-life action for a reason. And in turn, the speeds today, some of these drivers are reaching fairly significant, more than 200-plus miles an hour around this racetrack.
Yeah, Monza's always been one of the fastest GPs, and they're kind of all, I believe they're all the fixed length now. They're all supposed to be something like 305 kilometers or something like that. So Monza, obviously with very, very high average speed, means it is one of the shorter Formula One races. Typically the race is about anywhere between an hour and 15 minutes and an hour and 30 minutes. So yeah, very short race time-wise, but distance-wise the same. Just the average speed is so high. And I think generally speaking, it's one of the nicer races of the year. It's kind of an old-school track. It obviously does have pavement runoffs and whatnot in the chicanes now, but yeah, it does always have that old-school feel to it, and it's kind of always a race that I like to watch.
Keep in mind, it is among just one of 2 GPs that have been on the schedule since 1950 for Formula One action as well. So a lot of history when it comes to the tempo of speed here when it comes to Monza. Looking towards one of the battles still, the race lead still remaining close at the moment. Dallas Pataska still remaining within arm's reach of Kurt Krum. Right now, their lap times in the 124.9s to 125 flats at the moment, Samuel.
Yeah, and you can see that Kurt Krum keeps swerving across the track every now and then, trying to break a toe, and Dallas Pataska sometimes follows him, sometimes doesn't. So it's quite evident right now, even though Dallas goes purple and sets the fastest lap of the race, that Dallas has absolutely no intentions of taking the lead. In fact, looking back through the field, it was quite calm last lap around. The closest battle I saw was for 14th, 15th and 16th. And one of the drivers I'm keeping an eye on there is David Sorrento, running in 15th place. He's actually carrying a bit of damage to his front wing, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of our early pitters. And I also want to give a shout out to Colin Marzoff in the 84 car in 14th, because I think it's almost kind of a retro Benetton livery he's got on that car, and it looks really nice.
Very interesting livery. Let's put it that way when it comes to Colin Marzoff compared to his normal liveries for the Hanson Brothers racing machine. This time, I can to go with appears to be a Trinity style scheme.
It's a John Deere paint, so it just happens to look like a 1992 Benetton. But yeah, no, I don't think any Formula One cars back then were carrying John Deere around.
Yeah, I think if anything, if you think of the comparison, this might be towards maybe the Chad Little machines when it comes to the NASCAR side of things, when you match the color scheme and some of the design parallels to Marzoff. But at the moment, he is still being able to pull away. Keep in mind, that car did have some good speed in practice, Christian. It was second quickest on the board. It's just a matter of, one, it was one of the cars who had to avoid the carnage in lap 1, turn 1.
Pataska's going for it. Pataska's going for it at Rettifilio.
For the battle for the race lead, side by side. Kurt Krum tries to hug the right side of the racetrack, heading to the Della Raggia. Pataska goes for the switchback. Crum trying to defend the inside line for the braking zone. Even on the braking marks, the VRS satellite racing machine, though, not able to make the move. Into the rumble strips they go, and that's allowed Handsome Pete to join this to become a 3-car pack.
And I think that's kind of what's got this going, and Pataska trying to actually make the pass for the race lead. You see coming off of Parabolica here, he's well within DRS range, and actually a little bit surprised he wasn't able to get this done just into the first chicane. Hanging a bit far back down the straightaway. Only actually gets alongside kind of as he's at the 150 mark on the braking boards, and he tries the outside, does manage to get through the first chicane without any contact, so good job by both these drivers here, but not able to actually pull it off into the second chicane, so he's going to have to wait at least another lap. But I think what started this off is that Pete Herod has been catching this pair, and Pataska wants the lead to try and get away.
124.5 turned by Pete Herod right before all this inquired, and now Handsome Pete is within 10 car lengths of Dallas Pataska. No move this time with Kurt Crum trying to break the toe. And you mentioned the DRS zones. That's something to keep in mind, Christian, because when it comes to this track, there are those in theory for the real-life GP. For the current cars, keep in mind, the current cars, as we see Joshua Wolf have to come in.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of trickery that you can kind of play with the ERS and the battery charging as well. So ERS is kind of greatly simplified from where it was in the past in these cars, and what you have is the option to select a kind of a battery charge state that you want to target. So what you can do is you can go between 25, 50, and 75%, and what that really means is that you can run a lap at 75% to charge the battery up, where it won't really deploy at all, as we see Pataska's actually going for almost an attack into Ascari here, and then you can change it back to 25% and kind of dump the battery over the next lap in the hope that it's going to give you enough pace advantage to make that pass.
That's the interesting thing when it comes to the McLaren MP430, because it was very different rule sets at the time of this car. A lot has changed over the time to where you can use the various ERS settings. In recent years, too, what fuel settings you can use for the real-life races as well. On top of those set DRSs, you see those flaps open up, for example, for Dallas Pataska down the straightaway. Pataska's going for it. Nearly clears himself, entering the first corner. Crum trying to keep it side by side, can. Dallas Pataska retakes the race lead in the Italian Grand Prix. Will Kurt Crum try and go for it back is the question, as Pete Herod is within 4/10 of this fight. Pataska defends to the inside. Crum goes outside. Last time that didn't work for Pataska. This time, Crum can't make it work either.
Yeah, and Crum trying to attack there and failing to do so actually hurt him quite significantly there, and Pataska's been able to pull out a pretty significant lead, and now Crum's having to go on defensive because Herod's going to be all over the back of him. He's going to get the slipstream as they go on the run down to Ascari here. The left-hander kicks off the chicane, and Crum is positioning his car quite well, not doing anything too defensive. They're really running nose to tail, quite close. A lot of respect from these drivers without any carnage this lap. Great quality driving here as they go on the run up down towards the Parabolica, and Crum has been able to hold off a challenge. He might not have DRS, so he's about a second back of Pataska. So let's see, this could be advantage Herod if his rear wing flap doesn't open.
And down the straightaway, indeed, no rear flap opening up, no DRS for Kurt Crum. He has lost that advantage. Pete Herod did get DRS down the straightaway, did not elect to take the run, though. We're about halfway through these first stints. For some of these drivers, keep in mind, on lap 13 of this race. And it's going to be interesting what Pete Herod tries to do. Since the pass, Pataska has ran away by 1.3 seconds from Crum, Christian.
Yeah, and that worked out basically as well as it could have done there for Pataska. He was within the DRS range of Crum for that second DRS zone, kind of running down towards Ascari. But because Herod was there as well and he was attacking Crum, Crum wasn't able to kind of focus on staying with Pataska. So by the time they got around to the front stretch, he was already too far back. And now, realistically, Pataska's got quite a nice cushion. You see, Herod's got to run down to Ascari. It's not really a passing place, but he's going to have a look.
Trying to take a peek towards the right side, not able to make it side by side through Ascari. Back single file they go, heading towards the newly renamed Curva Alboreto. That's in honor of Michele Alboreto, and a recent change when it comes to Monza compared to the many years. It's been called Parabolica over the decades, Samuel.
Yeah, and I'm going to keep calling it that, to be honest. Let's see what happens between these guys as they go down towards the first chicane. But then I'd like to try and find out what happened to Colin Marzov, because he's currently running out there on track without a nose cone.
So let's take a look at him right now. He was in a decent spot the last time we looked at Marzov. Running a 13th last time by the stripe. Here's a look at what happened. As you can see, he still has the front wing of this section. And then he tries to turn into a rocket ship.
That's a John-Eric Verne impersonation. I think Verne did something similar at the first chicane about 10 years back.
That's something to see in drag racing from John Force, possibly from the 1990s and 2000s. Here's another look coming.
Yeah, you can see he hits the very end on of the sausage curb. And you know, this is a great time to bring up, once again, why I don't like sausage curbs, because that's exactly what can happen with them. You can hit them end on and you can launch your own car up. And I mean, that did look a little bit probably exaggerated from what we might expect, but if anybody remembers the F3 car that went flying off at Parabolica not so long ago from hitting a sausage curb end on, it can truly happen. So, yeah, not a fan of them to police track limits. No, I don't have a solution as to what would police track limits instead of aggressive curbs, but I really do not like those curbs that launch cars. I think it's super dangerous.
And as he comes out the pits, that battle for second was right behind him there, but it looks like a holding station for now.
Colin Marzov electing to hug the inside line, not playing a factor in this fight. He did keep the medium compound on tires in. Bright side for Ross Banfield, he did pick up some DRS as a result of that. Udis Pateklos, who's been running inside the top 10, having a bit of an issue through the formerly named Parabolica. He went spinning a full 360 through the sand trap and all the way to the wall, lucky to avoid damage here.
He's got on the power a little bit too aggressively. No, did actually get into the tires with the front wing and the right front, but doesn't appear to have actually damaged it too badly.
Only lost one position from it. Downside, he has Vila that is closing on in fairly closely as a result of said incident. Of note, by the way, Dallas Pataskas since taking the race lead, starting to set purple lap times on the medium compounded tires. 124.3 last time by. That was the fastest lap by anybody by a full 10th. He is on the power and on the charge and then some in the VRS Satellite Racing Machine, looking very confident out there, Samuel.
Yeah, and to go back to the fuel conversation you guys were having earlier, that is something that they do in real life, of course, is run a little bit less fuel that they can get away with the knowledge that at some point during the race they'll probably be in traffic where they can save fuel. Obviously, Pataska was able to save fuel early on. Right now, he's burning it as much as he can to try and open up as big of a gap as he can. And if he does need to save fuel at the end of a race, maybe he'll have a 10-second lead or so where he can afford to do something like that. Obviously, one nice thing about iRacing that you don't get in real life is you don't have to provide the sample back to the stewards at the end of the event.
That's a discussion for another time. Let's put it that way. I know what you're referring to this year when it comes to Grand Prix action. You see Joshua Wolf's viewpoint on the right side of your screen, by the way. You can see one thing, he's keeping an eye on Christian in part with everything where he's out of the racetrack, looking at the intervals. The car in front of him is for position. That's Tom Drailing, who did hit a sausage curb after overrunning a curb just like that to give him damage. And that's a position given as a result of that mistake. Downside, next car's 4 seconds up the road.
Yeah, he's obviously on a bit of a fight back. That first lap in the start really did not go the way he would have wanted, and pretty much damage recovery mode at this point. But, you know, there is obviously a lot of cars ahead of him at minimum. I mean, I think Wolf has to make another stop as well anyway because he's on the mediums, but there's at least one more stop for almost everybody in front of him. So he's not out of it. He can probably still climb up to the back end of the top 10 would be my suspicion. I think he's out of range of getting into the top 5, though.
Tough race for Wolf. We see, meanwhile, replay. This is Ray Partridge, who has had some eventful moments today. cartridge, the last of the cars who have not taken service. He still has front wing damage on the left side of the wing as well as the end plate. And he continues to have the situations like this where he's been having to dodge these barriers, able to dodge all of them effectively this time.
I'm wondering if League requires you to do that, because I'm pretty sure iRacing doesn't. You just have to slow down. You don't necessarily have to do the zigging and zagging there, but nice to see they have a runoff area set up how they do in real life. Got a nice battle for second still going on between Crum and Harrod, and Crum has been driving very defensively, zigging and zagging, and oh boy, almost chops off the front of Harrod there. That could have been a very nasty collision if Harrod hadn't backed off. So I think this is a little bit more intense than what we saw going on for the lead about 10 laps ago, where Pataska was content to just ride in second for a little while. Harrod really seems to want to get by Crum, and if these two battle too much, Banfield will run them down.
Yeah, this has been an intriguing battle, and you can tell a bit of the urgency from Pete Harrod, you'd have to think, though, because he's still got the DRS to try and pull him down the straightaways, and it's to the point where he closed up a couple seconds alone, ran similar lap times to what Pataska's running in clean air. Now he's losing time by half a second per lap at the moment. Have to feel some of the urgency might be starting to pop in, Christian, knowing he's got the pace to run similar laps to Pataska, but hasn't been able to make this move.
Yeah, it absolutely does, and as you say, the kind of urgency to make the pass, it definitely looks more here than it did with Pataska versus Crum at the beginning of the race. You see somebody in a TFR car in the background. I believe that might have been Malneritz actually going for a spin there.
Yes, it was in the 69 machine. He went off in towards the runoff area and avoided wing damage after the spin. So here's the one thing to note. If you go through the sausage curb sections through the Orangia forwards, you damage the front wing. Going backwards, you avoid damage.
Or a mistake from Crum and Ascari. Harrod's right on his tail now. He might actually have a run down to Parabolica.
That's a little bit up the road from this battle we're taking a look at on screen. Crum did hold on to second position at the other end of the straightaway heading to Alboreto. Keep in mind, though, as a result of said mistake referred to, Ensign Pete is within a car length. Can he line this up properly to try and make this pass for second? Crum gives him the right side of the racetrack. Big pull for the Team Mad Machine. Crum trying to take the long way around. Pete Harrod able to rip away second position on the move.
Now, obviously, he's going to try and track Eck out that he's got that position. He might try and swerve a little bit as they come out of Curve Grande here to break the slipstream. If he can get through the Lesmos well, maybe he can put a bit of a gap and try and close up on Pataska. Not seeing an interval there next to Banfield. I'm not sure what that's about. I'm also keeping an eye on Joshua Wolf. He's finally starting to catch some cars up after his bad start to the race and starting to pick off a few positions.
Taking a look back at Josh Wolf in particular after said situation, up to 14th now. He is in a grouping that includes David Soranzo, Rob Galvis, the car he had passed recently, his 31 machine, to move back to 14th, still a minus 12 on the day.
Okay, the problem for Banfield, I think, is connections, Justin.
Yes, I was about to say, yes. He has been having that of note for the past couple laps, so for Banfield, that can be a potential concern to the point where he is now officially falling down said interval board with the result of the technical issues. If indeed that becomes the case, it would be a disaster for Banfield, who has been having a solid point season, Christian.
Yeah, that's a really rough deal. It's happened to me a couple of times this season as well, and you know, it's just it's a bit soul destroying because there's nothing you can do about it. It's nobody's fault. You know, you didn't make a mistake or whatnot. So yeah, I really feel for him. And that obviously was running inside the top 5. Was definitely looking for some good points today, and it's just unfortunately not going to pick those up now.
Indeed, falling down the boards, and the official confirmation has come in. Banfield out of the server due to technical issues. Unfortunate for him, as you see Wolf on your screen. This is now the fight for 13th. Soranzo does have a crumpled up front wing from that lap 1 incident. Speeds about 201 miles an hour. Soranzo actually lifted halfway down the straightaway to let him on go with the damage. They've also passed by a couple other edition cars, including Viola, who pit for a 4-second stop from inside the top 10. So a couple of the drivers are having to take a bit of service after 19 plus laps on the respective stints. Taken towards the other side of the racetrack meanwhile. Nick Miller currently battling with Trevor Vronsky. We haven't mentioned Vronsky too much today, Samuel. Up 5 positions so far.
Yeah, there have been a few big movers. Antonio Navarro, I think, is the biggest one, 23rd to 8th. So that's plus 15 positions. And Wolf, we've been watching him. He's actually taking 10th place from his teammate David Baker right now. And obviously Baker's not putting up too much of a fight, so we'll stay with this battle here. But really nice to see Wolf coming on leaps and bounds in the last couple of laps as these guys go side by side into the red video. And that's not the way to take it.
And Dick Miller has spun around in the 83 machine, the dog bear car, missing the rumble strips, but that loses him a ton of spots. Isaac Snyder drives on by. The next cars behind are lap traffic. So Dick Miller drops to the 7th position as a result of that spin. And another lockup. What is going on with his car? He's having a massive issue all of a sudden. The second chicane, he's overran and had to miss the turtles for.
Yeah, well,
Sorry, go Sam.
Yeah, I was just going to say that these tyres on these cars obviously are infamous for not being friendly to you once you screw up once, Christian.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually partially what I was going to say as well. Obviously, you make a mistake, and then you're kind of knowing that you're going to the next corner with a set of kind of angry tires. But the other thing is that it's a car that's very much rhythm based and kind of staying in your groove and whatnot. And if you start to make mistakes, it's very, very easy to keep making mistakes, and it's hard to get back into a good rhythm. So obviously, as we've said before, most of the drivers here are not used to driving this car. You see Saranza with his broken wing actually making a pass here.
That's a pass on the outside. That's on David Baker, who also has left side damage on his front wing. So both of these cars having damage. Baker, though, he's been running as quick as the 126s. He's fallen off 1 second off his quickest pace overall, as you see some of the struggles. The backdrop for Baker really struggling with the turns compared to Saranzo. Despite having a fully crumpled up wing, he seems to be able to handle the turns a touch bit better, although they are 1 second slower than the next cars for position ahead because of said damage. Of note, Ross Banfield has returned to the racetrack 1 lap down in the 777. He is not the last car running, though. Ryan Mayer is 2 laps down.
Oh,
So
exit stage right in front of him. A car just spun off at Parabolica.
And it's Tom Drelling, who has been having a nightmarish Major Series campaign. Another incident for Drelling, and this time, to the right-hander, it's a step to the left, through the grass and then some. Races in part with Tifosi Racing, and for Tom Drelling, it has not been a pretty campaign, and it's not been a pretty Grand Prix.
You see getting on the power, it just snapped away from him, and you know that the exit of Parabolica and also actually the exit of Ascari are kind of the 2 major places on the track where that can happen to you very, very easily. You do have to be very, very wary, especially on old tires, that's kind of going to increase in probability of happening. So yeah, just unfortunate, but very easy to get caught out by that.
Lorenzo, by the way, still battling with Baker a little bit. Keep in mind, Baker is keeping up. Salt of the DRS, but Rob Gall, who has no damage on his car, is closing up and fast. Last time by was nearly 7/10 quicker than Baker, in fact. So he is starting to try and make it a 3-car scrap for the 11th position on the racetrack. As we start lap 23, Baker electing to continue to follow on in this choo-choo train.
Yeah, talk about how quick a laps tick off here. We're almost halfway. We've got 4th and 5th place running nose to tail right now, but I don't think it's going to get too intense because the similar paint schemes indicating their teammates, David Melnoritz and Trevor Vavrosky running nose to tail. They're on the run up to the Parabolica right now, but just keeping an eye on that in case anyone tells the lead car there, hey, Vavrosky is faster than you, but we'll see.
Now, one thing I want to ask Christian on that mark then is, say you do catch up to a teammate in regards to that battle for 4th or 4-2, or you end up having someone that you eventually close up. What's kind of the discussion like, knowing Especially when it comes to Grand Prix racing, teamwork can be fairly critical at times.
I think it depends on the situation, if I'm honest. So, say for example, with Melnitz and Vavrovsky at the moment, they are in no man's land. They've got about 10 seconds to Chrome up ahead and say about 7 or 8 seconds back to Snyder behind. So, in that situation, there's no real reason to not just kind of have a race because nobody's going anywhere. You're not under threat. You're not threatening anybody else. So, in that sense, I think no questions are really asked because it's kind of the fun that they're going to have in this. But say obviously if the situation was where you were in the top 5 and everybody was very, very tightly packed and you felt like you had a little bit more pace, yeah, for sure, there's discussions that happen where you might let a teammate by to go and have an attack, and then in the event that they pass them, great, awesome, hopefully you can pass with them, but if they don't, then usually the kind of protocol is to kind of swap them back around.
Should be worth noting too, the outer battle we were keeping an eye on. David Baker elected to come in, but did not take tires, I believe, Samuel, because it was a 4-second stop. He jumped up on the jacks, but he just changed the front wing. He just only changed the wing on the car, if I've seen correctly.
Yeah, that's what the animation seems to suggest, but that doesn't make logical sense at all. The time it takes to get your wing changed, you can easily take tires, and I don't think they're limited on tires, are they, Christian?
No, they're not, but I'm wondering if it maybe just appears that he didn't take tires because he didn't change the color branding of them, because there's no rule in this series as to using different compounds, so he might have just put mediums back on.
That would make sense. Either way, he did replace the front wing. Embrace the fast repair possibly might have been the thought process there too. So a bit of the earlier side, Soranzo ends up going for the overcut in turn after seeing his competitor behind. Likely come in and should expect to see the fast repair right there. There's the tire change. Off and away, yes indeed, there's the fast repair used by the 738 in turn. The question is, where we cycle out, Samuel?
Yeah, we'll see. It's a very slow pit road speed limit here, by the way, 40 miles an hour. A front wing, you can turn fast repairs off if you wish to. If you do choose to change the front wing manually, obviously it's going to take a little bit longer. I think it's probably around 15 seconds. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Christian. But it will save your free repair. You can use it later in the race if you do get involved in a bit of a nastier incident.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on how fast it actually is to swap front wing on one of these, but yeah, that's definitely kind of my thought process as well. But I suppose it also depends on how you're kind of approaching it. So if you were somehow the race leader who had a damaged wing, then you probably would take the fast repair because you would lose too much time otherwise. So maybe that was his thought there. He was in a battle with somebody and he knew they'd taken a fast repair, and if he was going to take one as well, he would be able to continue that on. But obviously, yeah, high risk because it's still a long way to go.
By the way, you see on screen Navarro coming in for service. Ending up taking the tires. So we are at the halfway point of the Italian Grand Prix, and some of the drivers are electing to split this race simply in half, going mediums to mediums on the compounds. Make it simple. As talked about, some drivers could push a little bit further, though, when it comes to those compounds. New fastest lap, Ross Banfield, a 1:23.9. He's up to 19th position, but he is in that awkward situation where he took softs to be able to get himself back going on the racetrack after his situation. As well, Colin Martzoff, of note, has picked up additional damage on his machine as well, as we take a look at the battle for 13th.
Yeah, we saw Marzov back in the pits without a nose cone once again. We saw that happen to him earlier. Yeah, it's actually kind of nice to see Ross Banfield back up there so quickly. With as short as his track is and as fast as these cars are, you would think a disconnect would put you a few laps down and out of a race, but he's actually back out there, only 1 lap down.
Must be a very good computer then to be able to boot up iRacing within 30 seconds after a technical issue like that, Christian.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Normally I lose quite a few laps when I get disconnected from a service, so yeah, a little bit lucky I would say in terms of being able to recover, only be 1 lap down, but he's definitely going to have to pit again because he's out there on softs, and I imagine that's probably a legacy of when his car was towed back and when he was rejoining, he probably had it already set up to take softs, and well, that's what he's been given.
Rob Gall now coming in for his scheduled stop. Went 26 laps on his respective stint. We are now at 27. laps to go at the stripe. So the Dog Barrier machine electing to also take the medium compounded tires, keep those on the car, but Rob Gall taking a longer stop, it appears here. You have to think possibly manual damage repairs because there doesn't appear to be a front wing change, if I'm seeing correctly. Do you think this might be something underbody?
I think he might have sped on pit entry.
Well, that would explain it, yes. And that's a 40-second hold, Christian.
Yeah, it's a pretty disastrous deal to speed on pit entry. Obviously, there is the protocol is essentially to kind of mimic what a stop and go would be. But because he has service checked, that's why he's getting the 40-second hold, because otherwise he would be able to kind of get the penalty for free, so to speak.
Can't confirm when he was at the yellow cone. It was 53 miles per hour to the 40 miles per hour speed limit. Exactly what Samuel referred to earlier. Speed limit is fairly slow here at Monza, despite being the temple of speed. But when you get that sort of situation, the temple of speed books you for having the speed in the wrong place. Udis Pateklis is also coming for service. Dallas Pataska continuing to charge on forward. His lead has extended to 6.4 seconds and has been in clean track majority of the way. He has lapped as high as the 13th position at the moment.
Some drivers out there, big movers, as you mentioned. Ross Banfield, fastest lap. But one driver we haven't really gave a shout out so far today, Justin, kind of just running in 6th place, is this guy, Isaac Snyder.
Yeah, Isaac Snyder's been having a very quiet day so far today. He might get a little bit of a scare, though, in front of him, because David Baker just had a spin through Alboreto and is going to come out of the sand trap right to his left. Able to keep away and actually gives a ton of space. But for Snyder, remember, had a decent start to this race, Christian. Had some good battles, is now just trying to keep up the rhythm. He is now the last of the drivers who have not come into pit for service yet to change their composite tires, as Dick Muir has come down this time behind him.
Yeah, he's in kind of that sort of position where he's having a good run, but also kind of nothing is happening to him, so to speak. He started as 6th, he's running as 6th, he's looking like he's probably going to finish in 6th, so, you know, that's it's kind of a weird situation, because you know that you've done a pretty good job, but at the same time, it's been a relatively monotonous race for him. We're probably going to see him pit in the next lap or two. Obviously, he has got Mueller behind him, who might actually jump ahead of him here with this undercut strategy.
One car around right in front of them. That will move him to 5th position and break up the 3 different 6s. That's Trevor Bobrovsky, who went around from the top 5. Unfortunate for Bobrovsky, a big mistake coming out of Lesmo. Sammy, let's take a look at this one. And this has been a mistake that can happen fairly easily.
Yeah, and that was a hard hit. Rips both wins off a car. That's a McLaren, not a Red Bull. Kind of wishes he'd have a Red Bull right now because he needs some wins on that thing, and he's going to try and bring it back to the pits, and obviously he'll be able to take a free repair. He's honestly not going to lose a heck of a lot out of this. This could have been a lot worse for him than what it is, because he's completely destroyed the car, but he's been able to recover, drive it back to the pits. He'll get a free repair, and he'll still be in contention for a decent finish.
And keep in mind, it is in a scheduled pit stop window, too, because a couple others did just come in with them, Christian.
Yeah, I was actually just about to say, this is kind of around the point where we'd be pitting anyway, so yeah, time lost for sure, but definitely not race ending, so to speak, and I believe I saw Pete Harrod and Kurt Crom actually come down to pit road last
night.
and
look, Pete's in the pits, but this is a very long stop.
I think he might have been booked for speeding, too, possibly. That is huge points implications for Handsome Pete. He sped at 62 miles per hour at the cone and locked it up for a good 30, 40 feet after said cone. He nearly got ran over by Kurt Crum, in fact. He locked it up so much coming into the pit lane.
I'm actually a bit surprised that Kurt Crum doesn't also have a speeding penalty then, if he nearly ran into the back of Pete Harrod, who did get one.
And here's the speed. Pete Harrod trying to turn his way down underneath the cone, and a massive lockup, not even close to make it to the speed limit. More than 20 miles per hour speeding, even with the time average segments, you're going to get booked for speeding regardless.
Yeah, it's really the one thing I think that can hurt. One of the biggest threats stopping Dallas Pataska from potentially winning this race. He doesn't need to push it when he comes into the pits, is the good news. If he comes into the pits, I doubt he's going to try and make these mediums run the whole race distance. So, but yeah, now obviously with his competition kind of gone from behind him, he can ease it into the pits. He doesn't have to push it. But that is a very big penalty to pay if these drivers do go over that very slow pit road speed limit. So hopefully for Pataska's sake, he doesn't mess it up too badly. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see him come in very shortly.
He's actually coming in now.
Right on cue. Almost like you timed it up perfectly. How about 31 laps on his respective stint now for Pataska? So
I was just going to say, JP, I'm curious to see if he puts another set of mediums on here and just kind of plays it safe, or whether he goes for the softs on that lighter fuel load.
We'll see as he arcs his way into the box. Looking like he's trying to sweep himself out, and he takes the softs here, Christian.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if he can maintain pace now on the softs. It is kind of the more aggressive strategy, and honestly, I don't think he needed to do it because his main competition is now essentially out of the race.
I almost have to think, do you think he's trying to go fastest lap here? Because remember, Banfield has it with his softs.
He might be, but there's no points for that, so he wouldn't really gain anything.
I mean, it's a thought. We'll see if it works out. For Pataska, he has a massive advantage. He is net lead. Malnerwich has to come down along with Isaac Snyder in the next few laps, in theory. Keep in mind, it's only a 10-second differential between first and second either way. So with the softs, Pataska might be able to close up rapidly. Looking at a battle, meanwhile, that's Navarro, who is up inside the top 7. Dick Miller was able to make the pass recently, though, amongst these cars. So Dick Miller trying to continue his recovery. Both of these drivers are on mediums. Let's take a look at the replay in regards to that position. You can see different positionings. That will change, it looks like, down the front straightaway with a bit of a help from DRS Samuel.
And as we watch this replay, I can tell you that Malnarowicz is into the pits. So as we anticipated, and that means Pataska will re-inherit the race lead. And yeah, just a nice simple DRS pass down the front straight, and there's the position.
And the funny thing is, even with all the mistakes that built up, he is up to 6th position. He has had a very solid race. One of the best rounds, Christian, he's had all season in the major series with all the different combinations.
Yeah, we've seen him have some kind of unfortunate events over the course of the year. And as you say, I had that spin earlier, but has recovered from it well. And that's, to some extent, the name of the game in these difficult car combinations. Because obviously the big thing is making it to the end of the race, and right now we have only 12 on the lead lap and quite a large field spread in terms of pace at the moment. So even though both of these drivers actually have spun, Navarro spun early on as well as Mueller, so both of them kind of recovering from spins, but because they're not damaging the car and they're not making mistakes in pit entry and whatnot and getting that speeding penalty, they're running well inside the top 10, and they look like they've got a great chance of picking up a top 10 here.
Muller, which by the way cycled right around Joshua Wolf. Wolf is right on behind, so a similar situation as before, but you see the contra strategy amongst the teammates in turn. Softs for the car in front of Underwich. Wolf elected to go for the medium compounds as a new fastest lap. A 1:23.2, half a second quicker than Ross Banfield's quickest lap time set the past 5 or 6 laps.
Yeah, and talking about Wolf here, we got him on screen. Oh, there he goes. He's coming to the pits now. I was going to say his first pit stop was very early on. I was going to speculate as to whether he was going to try and go to the end of those mediums. So, yeah. Oh, I hope he wasn't busted for speeding. We did see a bit of tyre lockup here. I think we're about to get an onboard replay.
Decent lockup. He was at 57 miles per hour at the cone. And
yeah, he's being held. Yep.
Yep, and he is booked for speeding once again. Drivers trying to push as hard as they can and not realizing that these tires do not help you stop immediately on a dime.
Yeah, and I wonder if that comes from practicing kind of pit entry on a set of brand new and kind of good tires, so to speak, and not accounting for the difference when you're on a set of very worn tires. But the kind of the pit entry and exit deal is one of those things that I've always found a bit kind of surprising in terms of how many mistakes we tend to see on those, because everybody tries to push as much as they can, but there's always so much more that you can lose by pushing than there is that you can gain. So it's always a bit surprising to me to see so many people get caught speeding on entry, because it's really not worth the risk reward.
Here's a risk. Isaac Snyder is the only person on the track not yet pitted, though, Christian, and the next car for position is already within nearly 2 seconds. Interesting scenario for Snyder, who is running lap times as much as 1.6 seconds slower than earlier in this race.
Yeah, he's definitely putting the softs on, I think. I imagine he's going to pit at the end of this lap and probably put the softs on.
Here's that pace differential we're talking about, and it's actually exponentially increased from 9 tenths lost to a second to 1.5 to 1.6. It's getting worse and worse, and there are cars with fresher tires right on behind too that may play a factor in this fight.
Yeah, and Kurt Crum, if Isaac Snyder, who's about to get unlapped by Joshua Wolf, who's back out there on his new tyres, if Isaac Snyder does start to hold up Kurt Crum, Kurt doesn't need to be too impatient here. He's got a nice 12-second gap over the next car behind him. So, you know, he can afford to take his time, look for a good passing opportunity. It should present itself eventually with a pace difference. And sure enough, Isaac Snyder's staying out. So Kurt Crum will want to get by Isaac Snyder this lap, but he doesn't have to. You know, he doesn't have to be in a hurry about this.
They're still outside DRS range, keep in mind, from one another. But thought process goes, Christian, and keep this in mind. We theorized that we expected everyone to have to come in for one stop. How long, in theory, can the mediums last without a puncture?
I think he's probably towards the very end of their life at this point. I know when I raced the mediums in the support series last week, to me it felt like they were, you know, good for 25 laps. They were okay for 30, and they were basically dead after 35. So I can only think he's staying out as long as he is to try and minimize his time on the softs, because he's worried about how long he can make them last. But, you know, if you were worried about how long you can make the softs last, the option to me would be to go for the safe, is allowing his teammate Kurt Crum by here. But my opinion would be that you go for medium, you know? If you don't think you can make the softs last at the end, go for the safe strategy, and just be sure that you'll get to the end of the race at a solid pace, because he's losing a lot right now.
Yeah, but the nice thing, if Isaac Snyder does opt to pit right now, I think he'll only lose one position. And with those new tyres at the end of a race, so here we go. He might actually still be able to get a podium out of this.
It's going to get intriguing now, as Snyder has come in to be the last of the drivers who had yet to make service. He did make the speed limit at the commitment cone, so that's the bright side. For the 13 machine has already dropped out of the top 3. Dick Miller expected to pass on by this time. Navarro is going to be the car that will be the potential benchmark. Navarro actually passes on by Snyder, so Snyder drops back to net 6th overall, where he's been running a majority of the way. He's actually lost time, though, to Trevor Bobrovsky, to the point where Bobrovsky is nearly there. Bobrovsky is within about a second and a half.
Yeah, so the pit delta there was a little bit bigger than I'd anticipated, but still, he might be able to pick up a couple more positions with those fresh tyres and only 16 laps left to go.
I think he's got a shot up to 4th place with Mueller, actually. He's within 10 seconds, and obviously he's got those reds on. If he can get some good pace out of them, I think that's probably where he's going to get up to.
See how it all plays out. Here's Dick Miller in particular. He is in the midst of a DRS train with lap traffic. Rob Gallo electing to let him on by this time. He also has right behind Colin Martzoff, and Navarro is trying to close up keep in mind, mediums for both Navarro and Muir in regards to that fight. So Muir now given the fresh, clean air. And we haven't talked too much about the impact of aero wash and dirty air today, Christian, because it can at times be a factor when you're riding behind. Even with the DRS helping down the straights, you get too close, it can get a bit interesting when it comes to the aero wash off that front wing.
Yeah, I found that with these cars, obviously the talk about them in real life is that it's very, very aggressive and it makes passing very difficult. And yeah, it totally does do that, but I think the kind of aero wash effects are a bit more gradual than you would have with, say, myself and you are used to on ovals with the Gen 6 Cup car, where it's quite noticeably aggressive when you get right behind somebody. With these, I found it's kind of very progressive loss. You know, you start to feel it from quite far back, and then the closer you get, the harder and harder it is to close up, because it's so gradual. It's annoying. You know it's there. You're losing lap time, but it's not surprising, I think is the best way I can put it.
Absolutely, and it's going to get intriguing how some of these fights in turn out, especially when you have some of these drivers close up like they are. We mentioned Navarro, for example. How about Isaac Snyder? He is currently on a heater right behind and trying to close up to this grouping as well. He is now within 4 seconds of that pack. Remember, he came out just about 5+ seconds behind. He is currently in the midst of his first major flyer since that pit stop.
Yeah, and the cars that he's catching are battling a little bit of lap traffic right now, so that's also helping it. Let's see if he goes purple here as he comes across the line. Not purple, but still a pretty fast lap, I'm sure. But yeah, there we go. The gap 3.5 seconds and descending. Now, of course, Isaac Snyder, though, will have to deal with these lap cars himself before he gets to Navarro.
Problem is, he just lost a heap of time because you've seen a little bit of the right tires. He turned too much in and hit the sausage curb, losing him some time on corner exit. Bobrovsky is just a touch out of DRS range as a result of that bobble, though. So Snyder is attacking these curbs aggressively to the point of over-aggression, Christian. And that could be dangerous again here at this racetrack if he hit those curbs too much, especially in those tight chicanes. A little bit of a bobble coming out of the corner as well this time.
Yeah, and it's kind of the exit curbs. Well, when I say the exit curbs, I'm sort of meaning the second apex curve that you tend to want to avoid. So into the first chicane, you want to cut as much on that right curve as you can, so that you don't have to do a really tight radius around the left-hand part. That helps you a lot with the exit speed. And of course, you don't want to hit that left side curve at all. It will lose you a significant amount of traction at the exit. But the same is actually totally true for the second chicane. You cut as much as you can on the first curve and try and avoid using the second one if you can, and just getting the power down and getting a straight line exit.
Trying to close up 15 car lengths to get the rub going, because once he gets to there, DRS flaps can open up. You also have Martzov in that train as talked about with Navarro for position. You've seen the lap.
Vavrovsky spins from behind him. Vavrovsky was actually going even faster than Snyder, so he was about to get involved in that battle too, but obviously that's not going to help him.
Almost looks like the same carbon copy of the braking situation with Wolf, where there was a lot of speed carried into the first corner. Try to close up a ton of ground fast to the point where he gained 5 car lengths in the braking zone. And the car said, no, that's too aggressive. I'm sorry. I'm going to spinny now.
Yeah, so with this car, you actually can... There's quite a lot of configurable options in terms of braking system. You've got the sort of the usual stuff. You have a pressure, like a total pressure option, which is basically how hard you can press the pedal before it locks up. But then you can also set a baseline brake bias, a peak brake bias, and a position on the pedal input where it starts to ramp that bias towards your peak value. And I've noticed that if you get that a little bit wrong, you can actually end up with either a situation where the front's locked too easily, which is, okay, you know, it's not great, but at least it's not going to spin you out. Or you can get the opposite happens, where you jam on the pedal and you're actually not ramping enough forwards, so then you spin out.
That's a lot of things to process when it comes to brakes. Meanwhile, Pete Harrod with the brake of his own. Outbrakes Bobrovsky. move him back to 7th as his recovery drive continues after being as high as 2nd and looking to be in the potential pace range to battle with Pataska, not close to that mark. Remember, after that speeding penalty earlier in this race.
It's too easy to miss out on, but I can't imagine he's anything but pretty mad right now.
Oh, very punny. Very punny.
It had to be done, JP. You know?
I mean, his car does have...
Too easy, too easy.
You have to wonder how his spotter Grosjean is feeling right now when it comes to that side of things. No, he supports Handsome Pete as well.
Isaac Snyder is not being done any favors by the lap traffic.
Yeah, you were just talking about how big that traffic could be. He lost 2 seconds just now from it, in fact. To the point where he got side by side for a full straightaway with Colin Martzoff. Surprising for Martzoff. Again, no blue flags. In theory, it's been a discussion point. Remember, if you remember back last year, when it came to some of the IndyCar events at Road America in particular, Martzoff didn't make this easy at all for some reason.
Yeah, no, I don't know if there was an incident between them earlier in the race, but that definitely seemed like Martzoff was not exactly doing friendly stuff there. So that's going to hold Snyder up a little bit, because we've been talking about how quick Snyder's been going and how fast he was running down the cars in front. But to their credit, Mueller and Navarro, now that they've gotten out of the traffic, they're running some pretty stout lap times as well. But we do still have over 10 laps left to go. So there might be some tyre fall off before we get to the end of the stint.
That's going to be intriguing for some of the fights to see how the various compounds taken come into play. Now, keep in mind, Dick Moore is currently running on his own, 5 seconds ahead now of Navarro. He has broken away. Navarro's pace with the tire fall off on 3 lap older tires. Keep in mind, Muir have fallen off by 7/10. So Navarro has fallen out of range to try and catch up to Dick Muir unless mistakes come into play. That in turn could make things interesting still for Snyder, since Snyder, this lap in clean traffic, did close back up those 2 seconds lost after clearing the traffic.
And it looks like it's Navarro who's actually going to be under threat. I think Mueller's going to be too far clear for Isaac Snyder to catch him. And you've also got to remember that Snyder's out there on those softs. So it's going to go away from him and actually towards Mueller and Navarro as the race kind of winds down with those guys out there on the mediums.
See the interval at the bottom of the screen, but watch for it in the braking zone. See how it dips right there for the braking mark for Navarro, but watch the balance back for Snyder on the reds. See, it stabilizes out. That's 3/10 gained in 1 corner. Just that extra bit of grip from the softs to be able to stick these corners and carry more speed is really helping in turn. But as you said, Christian, in theory, these tires are going to reach a cliffing point pretty soon.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a question of whether by the time he gets there, he's got enough tire left to make that work.
Big bobble that time along the curbing on the corner exit. We're down to 10 laps to go on the board for the Italian Grand Prix. To reset, Dallas Pataska has led since the early stage of the race after an early fight with Kurt Krum. He's since pulled away by 17.9 seconds. His closest car in terms of speed was Pete Herod, but Pete Herod got a speeding penalty that now sees him back in 7th position. Manerwich looking for the podium. Dick Muir looking to secure one of his best runs all year in the Major Series. And Antonio Navarro in a one-off start from 23rd to 5th has been one of the drives of the race. Again, someone we have not seen too much of throughout the time of the Major Series, has been putting in a great fight. We see Kurt Krum. It's been impressive, keep in mind, Samuel, because while it's been quiet for him for about 2/3 of this race, has been able to maintain the pace needed to hold on to 2nd and then some.
Yeah, well, the big advantage Kurt Crum obviously had was he got a very good start, because I think we were all a little concerned at the start of this race when we had a few cars get a bad launch off the line, and as a result we had a multi-car incident into the first turn. You kind of got the impression that, uh-oh, this is going to be one of those races. But to be fair to the field, it's actually been a fairly clean race, and Kurt Crum was able to get himself ahead of all that early carnage that we did have, and then eventually lost the lead to Dallas Pataska. Fought it a little bit, but eventually he had to give best. And now he's just had a nice solid race. He fell down to 3rd place, but as you mentioned, Pete Herod had his incident, and now here we see him in 2nd as we're within 9 laps left to go now.
Stephen Lerwich now still running 30 seconds behind on the leader, but 13 seconds ahead of the next car as well. His pace has been even to Nick Noor, and here's his viewpoint once more. Keep in mind, he's not using a formula wheel, Christian, compared to the others we've seen for onboards today. That is the base stock car style wheel that comes with a lot of various sim racing wheels on the market today. Nice racing seat as well as a little old-fashioned tube TV. It looks like from the 1990s almost.
Yeah, okay. I'm wondering what he's using that TV for, actually. If he finishes in 3rd, maybe we should ask him in the interview if he comes to talk with us. But yeah, actually, it's worth pointing out with Malmoritz that he's had some races this season where he's been really, really good. Kind of flown under the radar a little bit, but I remember in the TCR he was very, very impressive. And you know, obviously, it couldn't really be more different than the TCR this car. And with that disadvantage he's got of having to take one hand off the wheel and do it old school to go down through the box, he's doing a really good job, and he looks like he's on to hold on to that 3rd spot.
And keep in mind as well, Isaac Snyder into the DRS range just about. No open flaps this time, however, at the stripe, despite being within 1 second. But did gain a lot more ground in the braking zone. How about within 3 car lengths now, as a result of that lunge?
Yeah, I wonder if he just wasn't quite within the 1 second at the detection point, or whether he actually just forgot. It's actually kind of strangely easy to do that.
I mean, I've always wondered. Essentially, it's only in those zones. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christian. You can press it, or...
Yes. So what'll happen is if the DRS is available to you, kind of before you reach the actual zone, you'll see one green light will come up on the dash to kind of indicate that it's ready. And then once you cross the line into the zone, it'll switch to 2 lights. And if you have it active, it'll switch to 4. So there is kind of the warning system in the car. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You can only use the DRS in between the boards. You're not, well, actually, you're allowed to use the DRS from the board up until the point where you press the brakes.
So now, still outside DRS range, and this may not spell well for Snyder, because all of a sudden, those reds may have reached the matching point, if not the clipping point. How about a full second slower that time by for Isaac Snyder with traffic ahead with under 7 to go.
Yeah, Dirty Air may have contributed to that. And the problem for these two is that traffic ahead is actually in the battle of their own. That's for 13th and 14th positions. Jacob Oberslack ahead of Cordell Colan. So if those two start to battle, that could interfere with this battle for 5th.
The intriguing thing, by the way, for Cordell Colan in that regard, too, Christian, because of the timing of his incident, he will have to go the longest out of anybody on the medium stint tires, having to go 37 laps to make it to the checkered.
Yeah, that's a little bit rough. That's probably at least 3 to 4 laps longer than you would actually want to go. Although, I mean, we did see Isaac Snyder. He ran them out for, I think it was actually, what, 37, 38 laps?
Give or take. Just almost. It was close. But either way for Cologne, could become a factor in this situation, as we are now in the final few laps of this Italian
Navarro's off at the Parabolica.
And Navarro with a big mistake, yes indeed. So Navarro has lost the top 5 as a result of a mistake through the newly renamed Curva Alboreto. And it's a result of contact, possibly, with some of the internet you see popping in for Isaac Snyder. That may have been the worst timing for that possible, as Navarro is struggling as a result of this little boop right there. We might have to see it on board here from Snyder, because you'll see exactly what I'm referring to. Look for the left side of the wing here for this entry.
Definitely looks like there was a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was close. And as a result of that little boop, it's Isaac Snyder who jumps up to 5th. We're down to
not over though.
Yeah. You have to wonder what's going through Navarro's mind, knowing there's that bit of contact and knowing the sauce might fall off, possibly to go back in his hands.
I think actually he's probably more worried now about Herod, because Herod's now in the picture.
Good point. Indeed. Handsome Pete's right there within 1 second almost. So this could become a dogfight as they drive by one car who is spun around. That is Oberslack, who has gone around the inside barrier. Out of the way of the battle for the positions, however, so no harm, no foul for the race leaders.
Well, that will give Cologne 13th place, though.
So position gained, position lost for the car with the spin. Parabolica has been treacherous, and that could have been bad, actually, with how that position was. Those cars with some good awareness to be able to go to the outside.
Yeah, I mean, normally you... Well, actually, I was going to say normally you are on the outside there, but in some cases you can run quite a tight line and run through the inside there. So, not always, as you say. Oh, he spins again out of the second chicane. And this is kind of what we were seeing earlier, where once you've made that first mistake, you're out of the rhythm, the tires are unhappy with you, and then it's hard to get that rhythm back, and obviously now joining in amongst a lot of traffic here.
Yeah, and a few drivers who are laps down have picked up positions from him. One driver who might be able to pass him momentarily is Ross Banfield. Remember, he lost the connection earlier, and I think he might actually be able to get back up to 15th and 14th by the time the checkered flag falls.
Keep in mind, Banfield's on a 2-stop situation because it was confirmed by his team when he came out from the toe. It forced the softs. Meanwhile, this battle for position you see on screen heating up. It's Navarro and Handsome Pete. Can Handsome Pete make a beautiful move? Defensive line from Navarro. High line for Herod. Side by side to the braking zone. As Navarro misses it, he takes the turtles. Pete Herod drives to the right side. Slow down for Navarro. Pete Herod jumps back up to 6th with a big mistake with 4 to go.
And it's all kind of gone wrong for Navarro here in the last couple of laps. Oh, we've got a contact at the first chicane. Actually, multiple incidents. Aldous Pateklis has spun around, but there was contact right behind him as well. 2 cars getting together.
That's in live action. We'll see that in just a moment. Here is the mistake for Navarro. Right there, takes the sausage curbs like a ramp. And because he cut that part of the track, that is the slowdown. But you guys were talking about an incident too, Samuel. Here is that you guys seeing.
Yeah, this was a battle for 19th, and it's Mayer who comes off worst of this, getting hit from behind by the John Deere car. And as we mentioned, we have Pateklis spinning his own separate incident.
That was just in front of the contact. Again, Ryan Mayer hit by Colin Martzoff. Martzoff now 19th as a result of that. Some various different teams had to dodge around. Here's that view of that contact, though. This is after a pass attempt, in fact, you see. Keep in mind, Mayer is on a different lap cycle than Martzoff. Wow.
I have a feeling I've seen something like that before, but here we are. Yeah. 3 laps left to go.
No spoilers, let's put it that way. But we're coming up to 2 to go as quick as that. Dallas Pateska has put on a rocket show. How about a lead of more than 26 seconds? With 2 to go, but thick traffic around, he just needs to make sure there is no issues with said lap traffic, and he's home free for an Italian GP victory. And what would be one of the biggest victories for him this season in what has been a late season resurgence. After showing speed earlier in the campaign, Christian, but not having the great results in some of those cases as a result of attrition.
Yeah, and I'm actually really surprised at the gap that he's pulled out in this race here, because obviously at the beginning he was having that battle with Crum, and Harrod had his own kind of a misstep in the pit stop, but you know, he was kind of the same pace as Crum, a little bit quicker. Obviously pulled out about, I think, 5 seconds before that first stop, but it wasn't a huge margin. So to now be 25 seconds clear on the second run is both surprising and really impressive.
Joshua Wolf has came into the pits with 2 laps left to go from 12th place for no explicable reason. I'm going to guess he ran out of fuel and he just came into the pits thinking, oh, maybe I can top off fuel, but no, you can't.
No, it definitely looks like he's done for the day there.
I believe he's trying to throttle it up, but that is unfortunate. If that is the case, we'll have to see, as Wolf has gotten himself going after 44 seconds. So a situation for Wolf. Oh, wow. White flag waves. Final lap of the Italian GP.
A lot of traffic.
This is a hornet's nest and a half. This is almost like a dirt track up in front.
Yeah, he doesn't need to be involved in this. Honestly, if he felt uncomfortable, he might just want to back out of this.
Will he do so is the question. He's got a 26-second advantage. Just needs to make sure there's no trouble with this traffic as Claude Belval in front. No risky move there as Belval instead takes the sausage curb. That may be enough of a buffer to keep calm for now. Half a lap to go for Dallas Pataska. This would be his 4th victory of the campaign in the Major Series European Pro Split. And with Hanson Pete's troubles with speeding during his scheduled stop, this will expand the points lead by a significant margin. Final few quarters for Dallas Pataska. For VRS Satellite Racing, he's been on the pace from the drop of the green flag, took the race lead within the first 10 laps, and now he'll add the Italian GP to his victory books. Dallas Pataska wins at Monza.
Flawless performance. It'll be about 24 seconds until we see Kurt Crum, who's also had a nice quiet race there in second. And I think that's David we see in the back there in 3rd place. Nice performances by all 3 of these drivers. Actually, I think David had a little bit of a couple of incidents in the middle of the race, but there we go. Kurt Crum gets 2nd place.
Nicely done.
Coming across the line here, and yeah, I mean, honestly, like a really good performance by both Kurt Crum and Melneritz, I think, because they weren't 1, 2, 3 with Pataska in terms of grid order. Melneritz started 7th, Kurt Crum started 4th. You know, they've outperformed kind of expectations.
And almost a difference in moon sets there. Which
yeah,
over the moon.
A battle for 13th on the final lap. David Baker and Ross Banfield are scrapping with each other with just a couple of turns left to go.
Here's a look at that. Banfield trying to go and recover as he nearly made contact, trying to rip away that position. Baker drops back to 14th spot. Banfield, after technical issues from the top 5, recovers to a 12th place finish at the mark. That's the second car 1 lap down in what has been an impressive day. 10 cars finish on the lead lap. On that note, we'll take a quick break. More coverage of the Major Series in its European Regions Pro Split come up after this. You've been watching the Italian GP on GSRC. Welcome back to the Autodroma Nacional Monza on iRacing for today's coverage of the major series, European Pro Split Italian Grand Prix. Dallas Pataska takes home the checkered flag by 24.4 seconds over Kurt Krum. Aaron Monerwich comes home in third position to take home a podium. Nick Muir comes home in fourth after some incidents early on, with Isaac Snyder coming away with fifth. Pete Herod takes home sixth, with Antonio Navarro going from 23rd to 7th for one of the biggest movers all day. Trevor Bobrovsky finishes in 8th. David Sorenzo quietly goes 24th to 9th position after crushing his front wing at one point. The last driver of the lead lap in your top 10 is Udis Buteklos Christian.
And Edu Vila, he came home, the first car 1 lap down in 11th, but a good run by him to start in 16th and move up to 11th. Ross Banfield, unfortunately, we still have issues. He started in 3rd, but comes home in 12th. David H. Baker started 13th, finishes 13th. One of the few drivers to do that, with Cordell Colon behind him in 14th. Rob Gall actually back there in 15th, and the last car 1 lap down. Joshua Wolf, we saw he had a horrific start, which then ended up getting even worse throughout the race and finishes 2 laps down in 16th spot. Claude Belval in 17th. Behind him, Jacob Abraslak. We saw him have a couple of spins and some incidents today. Comes home in 18th. Colin Martsolf in the John Deere car saw have an eventful race. It comes home in 19th, with Ryan Mayer in 20th.
21st position going the way of Ray Partridge, with Tom Durrell in 22nd. Eric Mickey, Travis Henderson round out your entrants. Henderson, once early trouble, only completed 2 laps. But it's Dallas Pataska who put on a show in his car, to the point where he set the fastest lap time by about half a second. Dallas, first things first, another victory added on the trot. It's your 4th victory in the major series this season, and this time it was the Italian GP. How does it feel to be able to take this victory and add to what has been a stellar second half of the year?
It feels great. I had a little hiccup at the start, but I'm very happy I was able to recover cleanly. There was some good racing going on with Kurt there. Great defensive driving on his part. But yeah, I'm super pumped to be able to take this momentum from the Southern 500 a few weeks ago and keep it moving for this Monza F1 race. The next couple rounds, it gets a little bit dicey and some kind of wild card type situations with cars and tracks we're going to be running. So it was important to me to be able to get through these last 2 races with good points finishes, and what better way to do that than to win them.
Absolutely. And you mentioned amongst the drivers in sim as well, that the great challenge when it comes from Pete Herod, because he was on your marks early on in this event before his speeding penalty. What is that championship fight now like, knowing you had to claw your way back? You were a decent chunk behind just a few months ago in the point standings before this momentum swing came into play for the VRS Satellite Racing Machine.
Yeah, it's been a really nice turnaround. I think I started to claw my way back probably before the Southern 500, but I would say that race was the key turning point for me. That was one of my better performances, and I'm looking to carry that momentum into these wild card rounds where it'll be tricky to come out clean and with good points. So yeah, like you said, Pete, he was putting on a great show. I think he had a speeding penalty or something, so I kind of got lucky there. But with the poor start and everything, he was really having a good shot at putting the pressure on me. Luckily, I was able to get by Kurt in time, and Kurt held him up a little bit, so I was able to have just enough of a gap to work with. So, but yeah, he's very quick, and I assume we'll be battling each other for the rest of the season.
Now, you mentioned the next round, and keep in mind, this is a wild card round, in that for the 3 different regions of the major series, there are 3 different types of races. In that regard, for the European Pro Split, it's the Southern National 300, Southern National Motorsports Park, using the late models. And keep in mind, that is a car that was updated earlier this year. Your thoughts going short track racing amongst 2 of the 3 short track events going to be happening the weekend of October the 3rd?
Well, I mean, in general, I have a short track racing background, so these should be a good race for me. The late models, I don't really spend a lot of time with those anymore. That was a few years ago, but I'm sure some things will transfer, and I have a lot of time behind the wheel at Southern National, whatnot. More of a super late guy, but ultimately it's, the late models are pretty similar, just a little less horsepower. So yeah, I feel good about it, but with it being a short track oval race, you never know. It's hard to stay clean, stay out of trouble. So if we can do that, I'm confident that we'll end up in a good finish again.
Who do you want to thank for the run today?
I'd just like to thank everybody over at Majors for putting on the show, you guys for putting on the broadcast, Mike and the community for putting this on the schedule, and I want to give a shout out to David Nichols. He's running Euro Sportsman. Just joined the Majors VRS team this week, and I hope he sticks around for more.
Congratulations on the run, Dallas.
Thanks, guys.
Dallas Patasca, your winner today for the Italian Grand Prix. It adds its name to a prestigious list. Again, his 4th victory of the campaign. David Motorsport came away with a podium finish. He's with Samuel Ryman, and we've seen the emotions come into play too from him.
Yeah, you look.
Go on.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, that was very crazy race. Like, I won the support race 1 week ago, so I know that if I will not make any mistake, I can make a decent race. But P3 is way beyond my expectation, way beyond.
Yeah, we could see you were very pleased when you crossed the finish line there. Can you talk us through the start? Because you started in 7th place and things got quite chaotic there in the first turn. What was your view of everything there?
I mean, honestly, I haven't seen much. All I saw was just a bunch of cars in my middle going where they shouldn't go, and 2 of disappearing somewhere. So when I was 5th, after the start with quite a nice car behind me, I was pretty happy. I already knew what happened. There was quite a big one in T1, which is quite a bummer for all involved, but for me it played out perfectly and helped at my race a lot.
Yeah, how would you rate your race as a whole? I noticed you got 8 incident points, so it wasn't without a little bit of excitement.
Yeah, this was kind of clean. I am kind of bummed because if I wouldn't spun, it was lap 20-something probably. When I was chasing Ross, I would be 2nd because I saw Kurt had an issue towards end of the race, and it was basically the gap I lost during this because of the spin. But other than that, it wasn't much of an issue. The track limits here, which are in iRacing version very strict, especially in last mod section.
And one final question. Our director wanted to ask about the old TV monitor you've got behind you.
Yeah, this one. Yeah, it's like, 20 almost year-old TV. Kinda a souvenir I have. It brings me luck, as you can imagine.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you could hook up iRacing up to it one day. It would be nice to see what it looks like.
Oh yeah. But I will try to get this. I will see what I can do.
All right. How are you feeling about the upcoming races left in the season? And is there anyone you'd like to thank?
I mean, regarding upcoming races, I am the last leg is quite good for me. Especially looking forward towards Skip Barber race because slower cars are usually my best. Also, I want to thank my team owner Josh, our sponsors TFL Lab, SimSpeed, and JRT.
All right. Well, we appreciate you coming to talk to us, and thanks for hooking up a camera as well. It was great seeing the emotion when you crossed the finish line.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
David Motorsport coming away with a 3rd place run today, a very solid run in that regard. So, on that note, turn to you first, Samuel. Your thoughts, rather, on how things played out for the Italian Grand Prix.
Yeah, well, I mentioned it towards the end there. I was very concerned when we got into the first corner and we had multiple cars involved in the pile-up that we were going to be in for a bit of a wreck fest. But then things really got spread out and sorted out. We got to see some nice paddles, a little bit of chaos, a little bit of carnage throughout the race. But for the most part, they put on a good show. And 3 very, very well-earned podium positions there, the top 3 drivers. they put it all together great. Like David mentioned, he did have a spin during the middle of a race, but other than that, didn't really put much of a wheel on, and it'll be interesting to see how the championship unfolds with 3 races left to go.
Now, Christian, want to ask this in your part, because you'll be racing in this similar event later on today. Your expectations now for that scene, how things play out there, and what fans should expect for the American region, for the Americas rather.
I think it will, generally speaking, be quite similar. Kind of here in Europe, we had a top 5, I think, that was very strong and that were all kind of quite close on pace. We had a couple of mistakes in there which sort of dented that race, perhaps, in the second part of it. And obviously, Wolf having that mistake on the start really kind of sort of jumbled that up a lot. I think there's the potential to see something quite similar later on in Americas. Like I say, I feel like we've kind of got a similar sort of situation going on there, where we've got a very strong front of the field. A lot of drivers were under the 121s in qualifying, so definitely pace-wise, everybody's very, very close. Strategy-wise, I expect we're going to see very much the same thing. People starting on mediums, changing in the middle of the race, and some going for the aggressive option of the softs, and others just trying to double up with mediums again. So I think quite a similar race. Hopefully we'll get through turn 1 a little bit cleaner than Europe did. But yeah, on the whole, the thing that surprised me the most was actually the amount of penalties that we had on entry of pit road. I feel like that's something that people are probably going to take note of, and we'll see less of tonight.
It's going to be intriguing to see how the drivers fare out with the various different speeds, as well as how things play out overall in turn. I'd like to take the time to thank you for tuning in for tonight's action for the Major Series European Pro Split and the Italian Grand Prix. We'd also like to take the time to shout out the charity in support this round for the Major Series, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Whether you have struggled with suicide yourself or have lost a loved one, no, you're not alone. For more information, go to afsp.org. We'd also like to take the time to thank the companies that provide our software and hardware for broadcasts listed on screen. Additional thanks to Jude Law, who provides our wonderful music. See the screen for how to get a hold of more of our great work. Thanks to today's team in Christian, Samuel, Joe, and Dougie. You can find out more at GSRC or channel at the Global Sim Racing Channel, or rather globalsimracingchannel.com, or through social media listed on screen. Be sure to check out the merchandise store at simracingmerch.com/GSRC. Keep a link in the description below. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well, so you don't miss a moment here on the Global Sim Racing Channel. As talked about a little bit with some of the drivers, the next round is a wildcard round when it comes to the Major Series. For the European region, it will be the Southern National 300. Again, that takes place October the 3rd. Coverage starts 11:45 a.m. Eastern Time. But also don't forget, the Major Series is America's event. Takes place tonight as well. That starts at approximately 7:45 p.m. Eastern Time for the Pro Split. You also have upcoming races for other series listed on screen, so check those out and mark them down your calendar. Until next time, race clean, race hard, and we'll see you on the track.